Maybe you've seen this semi-viral clip of Top Gear guy Richard the Hamster Hammond talking about his near-death experience and his memories while he was in hospital. What struck me was how he really delves into the image of this view, this hill, and particularly this tree, as meaning something to him.
So I'm not scared of this old tree, and every time I pass it, I do feel comforted. I know it's where I'll go. But it does speak of the importance of place and the joy of being connected with the place. And I know this is very, very genuinely where I am.
Richard talks about place and how place as a certain space with a human connection can mean something to us. But while I was watching this video, I noticed this idea of place isn't just limited to Hammond's post-comatose ramblings. In fact, I think it extends to the other exploits of Clarkson, Hammond and May, all the way from Top Gear's first big challenges to the Grand Tour's elaborate specials. Allow me to explain why. Welcome to this video essay on road trips, travelogues, and a little thing called psychogeography.
Oh, well, of course you must have lots of tamales!
Now, you might be asking yourself, how on earth is this Mardy 20-something going to connect Top Gear to something that sounds semi-academic and potentially profound? Well, to find out, I've come here to Top Gear's old test track in Dunsfold, Surrey. You might be aware that a couple of years ago I released a video called Is Top Gear Imperialist?, which to date has made a certain quantity of Top Gear fans quite angry. The video you're watching right now is supposed to make up for it, in my mind at least. So I've come here to remind myself of what I liked about Top Gear. Now, rightly so, Top Gear's been criticised for being scripted. It is scripted. Uninformative, hard to argue that one. And occasionally downright bigoted.
There's a slope on it.
Yeah, yeah. As an object of its time, Top Gear often failed to rise to the occasion, making backwards references and dragging naughty's bachelor man culture back into the mud.
Plums are in the Amazon, look!
Where it probably belongs. However, it was also powerfully iconic. There were sometimes kernels of good advice, and plenty of solid banter hidden throughout the show.
Chief Design Director. His name is Samuel Chuffart.
Give over!
More than any of that, though, I'd argue that Top Gear really takes you places. It makes you feel like you've been on a journey with your best mates and seen some fantastic things along the way. This isn't necessarily about the range of locations that Clarkson, Hammond and May visited on Top Gear, including but not limited to Bolivia, Vietnam, Norway, Scotland, Italy, Switzerland, Russia, America, America again, America a third time, France, Hertfordshire, and also America. No, it's not about the sheer diversity of places, it's about the way the trio move through them. You have these shots of them really reflecting on where they are, even if what they say is total tosh. You have these really big panning shots that emphasise the sense of travel through a vast space. And during their expeditions, the guys frequently build relationships, if not with one another, then with their cars.
Oliver!
Much like Richard's experience of the Lake District, then, these moments all reflect a sense of place. It all happens at a manageable scale, filmed as individual level experience. This isn't some top-down cartography or planning or land management schlock. This is real, but it's also scripted. Well, after that passionate defence, I'm about ready to lean into the theory that backs me up on this. It's time to lend Top Gear some depth. It's time to get profound about power. Okay, so this is one of my favourite theories of all time, and I'm quite concerned that I'm about to bastardise it. So with the utmost care and respect, I give you psychogeography. What is psychogeography, you might ask? Psychogeography is a practice of the city as at once an objective and subjective space. What does that mean? Well, let me explain by going back to the start and working forwards. A psychohistory of psychogeography, if you will. Arguably the first psychogeographical instigator was this guy. For the first time with Baudelaire, Paris becomes the subject of lyric poetry. His gaze, as it falls on the city, is the gaze of an alienated man. Baudelaire was the ultimate beta male. He watched sad and aloof as the world of Paris went by around him, and he wrote about what he saw. His aim was to create a new kind of sociology, one of common garden experience of spaces. But the thing is, to start with, all this experience was pretty subjective. Baudelaire was an upper middle class dandy with no stake in the lives of the Parisians he was poring over. But instead of turning towards social science, psychogeography lent into this subjectivity. Which brings us on to Guy Debord was, is, and will probably always be one of the most significant Marxist theorists of the 20th century. He's most famous for writing The Society of the Spectacle, a total evisceration of consumer culture and mass media. Debord was also a member of the Situationist International, a group of artists, theorists, and activists who thought the best way to challenge the status quo was through constructing situations, moments of play and contradiction with the system. And that takes us up to Debord's psychogeographical innovation, the derive. The derive is a situation by which an individual purposefully gets lost, ignoring obvious routes and wayfinding points, and instead travelling in an entirely haphazard way about the world. For Debord, this usually translated to get pissed in Paris, but more broadly, it could help individuals think in different ways about streets and roads they otherwise took for granted. By wandering about in the space of the city according to their own sense of time, those undertaking a derive find other uses for space besides the functional. The time of the derive is no longer divided between productive time and leisure time. It is a time that plays in between the useful and the gratuitous. So Debord saw these experiences as a chance to escape the norms of space and time, and make your own luck. However, his style of psychogeography was predicated on a certain rudderlessness. To go the right way, you had to get lost. What about a kind of psychogeography that did have a name? Perhaps a route. For that sort of thing, we'll have to turn to another strand of psychos. Now, this is more like it. These guys, both British, both powerfully middle-aged, both hit the big time in the same bracket as Clarkson, Hammond and May, but as writers instead of fall guys. Unlike Debord, they and their packet of followers practiced a sort of travel as introspection. To quote Self, some see psychogeography as concerned with the personality of place itself. There's a mountain of books written in this vein as a result, tied to history, literature, and politics. Sinclair is probably best known for his circuit of trails around the M25, reflecting on lost worlds at London's edges. Hold up, that sounds less like a rudderless derive and more like a particularly dull Top Gear special. Well, here we are then, a journey that's planned, but still manages to be subversive, engage with the environment, and make you think. The only point where I have to diverge slightly from these guys is with Ian Sinclair's claim that you have to be walking to get psychogeographical. I mean, I get it, right? I don't know about you, but about an hour into a long walk, I start to get really lucid. It's when I have my best thoughts. It's when I came up with the idea for this video. Plenty of other writers walk hard for exactly the same reason. But I've also met people who have similar experiences on a bike. In fact, there's an entire book about cyclogeography. So why stop there? Think of the Orient Express, boats on the canals of Venice, or Route 66. There's plenty of serious, meaningful experiences predicated on modes of travel other than walking. What's more, the memorable parts of Top Gear don't take place on autoroutes or motorways at speed, those classic non-places.
Oh God!
They take place where the trio have time to take in the scenery, just like they would if they were walking.
There is Jez's back alley, well found.
Okay, so I've made it pretty clear what psychogeography can be, but you might still be wondering, what's the point of it? It's sort of underwritten throughout the thing that it's about seeing through capitalism by approaching its spaces in unexpected ways. But it's also about opening new perspectives in general. Like, Self walked from Brixton to Heathrow twice. That's definitely going to give you insights you wouldn't have had otherwise. Insights like, my leg has fallen off. And here I am, for much the same reason, tracking around old Dunsfold, trying to connect with some personality of place. It feels a bit like trespassing through memories, and also the back end of Surrey. But why exactly have I awarded this particular theoretical prestige to Top Gear? Aren't there umpteen programs that see a motley crew go somewhere and experience things? Well, I think there's one notable Top Gear quote that goes some way to explaining why it's special in this regard. And that quote is, "ambitious but rubbish." No matter where Top Gear travelled, they always looked to couch their travels in some, often extremely paper-thin, vestige of consumer advice. There was an element of groundedness present throughout, and the best episodes of Top Gear maintained a sense of relatability.
We're gonna die now.
Be it through artificially limiting themselves, or just making horrendous errors. Throughout all the misadventures, I think Top Gear maintained what a more pretentious presenter might call intersubjectivity, an absence of aloofness and an engagement with the present. Even if this engagement was constructed, scripted, and largely politically incorrect, it was still there in the final product. What's more, the peculiar ambitiousness of the programme made Top Gear's trips oddly subversive too. Putting Clarkson on a Vespa is pretty subversive. Sticking a bedroom in the back of a construction vehicle is pretty subversive. Protecting yourself from river water using a condom is pretty damn subversive. Oh, and Viagra.
Viagra.
That was another thing. In these senses, intersubjectivity and subversion, Top Gear's travels aren't so far away from Baudelaire's Gadabouts or Sinclair's Sojourns. Fuck me. In fact, I think you can point to other popular travel hosts with a sense of these values, like Michael Palin or Paul Theroux. Now, I know. In all these cases, you have super white dudes reflecting on places in admittedly superficial ways. Wait a minute. I'm a white dude reflecting on a place in a superficial way. In fact, that's one of the main critiques rightly levelled at psychogeography, that it comes from this weird middle-class clique of older blokes in Gore-Tex and waders. Thankfully, there have been some wonderful attempts to correct this with writers from other walks of life, proving that going places and feeling things isn't an irredeemable pursuit. It can be for everyone, and it should be. On this basis, I think psychogeography has plenty of life left in it yet. Richard Holistic Hamster Hammond coming out and recognising that these places mean something to him is just proving my point. And while this analysis doesn't rid Top Gear of the blame for some seriously messed up things over the years, I think it does go some way to explaining why so many of us loved it. Or maybe it was just the banter.